And everybody thinks, oh, it looks so much better to be in a big paper, but actually, it's not always right for every brand. There was a donkey and an Elvis impersonator, which is the recipe for a great party, if you ask me.
And they're two different things. The donkey wasn't the Elvis impersonator.
It wasn't. You've got to be local first if you want to reach the local media. And that's feedback we get from journalists a lot. They don't want a repurposed national story.
So we always joke that getting into Birmingham Live is harder than the Daily Mail.
I think it is. I don't disagree with you.
The care home provider we work with had a resident who wanted to be arrested.
She was put in handcuffs. The police took a few photos with her. She was arrested for speeding in her wheelchair. You know, from an SEO perspective, from a geo perspective, you have hundreds of regional publications, way more than you have nationals. And I think we're starting to see the value that having large volumes of coverage can have when it comes to appearing in the AI summaries, when it comes to ranking higher on Google. And that's something you can't replicate without regional media.
Welcome to What's Got the World Talking, the podcast that delves into what's on the minds of the marketing, PR and social media world. In this episode, what's got us talking is the UK's regional media landscape in 2026. Over the last few years, we've seen some significant changes. Newsrooms are smaller, resources are stretched thinly, and how people consume their local news is changing. So what's really happening in regional newsrooms? Is there an appetite for local stories? What are regional journalists looking for? And what does all this mean for brands wanting to secure meaningful local and regional coverage? I'm talking to Senior PR Director Rachel and PR Director Celine about how effective local PR can build brand trusts, why brands need a dedicated regional strategy, not repurposed national content, and why one of Celine's favourite ever local stories begins with the line, "There was a donkey and an Elvis impersonator." So Celine, Rach, do you want to start by introducing yourselves and explaining your role at WPR?
I'm Rach and I am a Senior PR Director here at WPR and I look after our regional media and stakeholder activation team.
And I'm Celine, I'm a PR Director at WPR and I also work as part of our regional media and stakeholder activation team, overseeing some of our biggest regional clients.
Fab. So let's start with a big question. Is regional and local media coverage still beneficial to brands?
So beneficial.
It's a juicy question.
It's so important. I think people underestimate regional media a little bit because some people kind of go after the shine of nationals and the Daily Mail.
Yeah, exactly.
And everybody thinks, oh, it looks so much better to be in a big paper. But actually, it's not always right for every brand. I think lots of brands, especially a lot of the client we work with, have got that big national brand with lots of little regional hubs. And it is so important for these hubs to be in those local outlets because they're ultimately where their customer base is. It's not necessarily the Sun or the Daily Mail reader, although it might be, but sometimes it's just the people who are going to read the Cambridge Independent, who are going to read the Birmingham Live. They're all the people that you want to reach because you want to know that they know where you are and you want to know that they know you're here.
And actually, if you want to get people into regional outlets, whether that is a development or a pub or a care home, you're not necessarily, you might get that brand awareness at a national level, but actually, again, like Celine said, it's going to be getting in the Oxford Mail or at a very hyper-local level, maybe what's going on in Oxford to find out what events are happening in your local area. And that's how you're going to drive footfall to whichever outlet, whatever client we're working on.
Yeah, I've always found that. National media is great for raising brand awareness. Regional media is great for converting that brand awareness into action, whatever brand needs that action to be.
Getting people through the doors, you're not going to necessarily do that with the amazing national coverage that looks shiny, but it won't always work.
So what advice would you give to brands who want to better connect with the communities they serve? And what's the best way to do that in an ever-changing media landscape?
You've got to be local first if you want to reach the local media. I think, and that's feedback we get from journalists a lot. They don't want a repurposed national story. They want something that's got a genuine local angle that local people are going to ultimately resonate with, because that's what makes them stand out. If we just give them a national story, there's literally no purpose or no point of a regional outlet publishing it, because that's what people will read in the Daily Mail anyway. So they want something that's going to make them stand out and really, really target that regional audience by giving them really relevant content that allows the audience to connect with a brand on a local level.
So what makes a great regional or local story? Is regional and local stories the same thing? Or again, would you have different approaches for regional and local?
Different, probably, because you've got the likes of Reach PLC who are like humongous and actually behave so much more like a national than, say, what's a smaller example? someone by Newsquest
Bromsgrove
or
Standard.
Bromsgrove Standard, who are the
You
loveliest
have niche
paper.
information. That's what we like to hear. This is why we're talking about it.
So if you compare the likes of Bristol Live, Birmingham Live, Reach PLC titles, they are going to have plenty of syndicated content that comes down from the nationals. They haven't got that many journalists who are on the ground who are going to be looking into what's going on in the local community. And then you've got the likes of Bromsgrove Standard, and they have a completely different culture in their newsrooms. They have journalists who are a little bit more on the ground. They're obviously their time is still tight, but they've got journalists who really care about what's going on in their local communities, what events are happening, what's important to the local area. And that means that the way we tailor our stories has to be different for those different kinds of titles.
So you have a very different approach according to the title.
Yeah.
And that's what you'd encourage brands to as well.
Absolutely. I think if you're going after that huge awareness across regional titles, then Reach PLC is great, but you're going to want a really quirky, creative story. It's still going to have that regional hit, that regional link. If you want to go after the Newsquest or National World titles, then you probably want a bit more of a community focus, whether it be a charity donation or a school partnership.
Yeah, I think the best example is with those big stat stories. Sometimes on a national level, you get a lot of success from releasing findings from a survey. And sometimes you have some regional data as part of that survey. The smaller regionals won't want regional data on its own because it's just not, it's not
still
telling
too
a
broad,
story.
isn't
It's
it?
still too broad. I think you only really get data from broader regions anyway. So if you get West Midlands data, Bromsgrove Advertiser's not going to care about the broader West Midlands. And I think you just really need that local element to ground it. So we've had a lot of success from having this kind of mixed approach to sharing local stats along with a local event or a local activity that's happening to really ground it in the local landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So you've obviously got heaps and heaps of knowledge. Can you talk us through what the regional and local media landscape looks now? How have mergers and acquisitions changed that? How many publications have closed, and what does it look like?
Well, first of all, I think our geographical knowledge is through the roof.
Oh my goodness,
I could name all the small towns in England thanks to all of those tiny publications we work with.
Yeah.
Is your knowledge of English geography better than French geography now?
I think it's getting quite close, you know. I think it's getting pretty close. I feel like I'd be really good at GeoGuessr on England only. But we've got teams essentially that specialise in specific regions, which means that they really, really have a lot of time to develop these relationships with all the smaller outlets. They will know exactly which tiny hyperlocals you have. And sometimes it's smaller newsletters, sometimes it's a tiny news site for a 300-person village of some sort where we have really, really nice relationship with the editor and we can just send them events that our local branches are doing. So that'd be the way we'd approach it first. I think what we're seeing with the regional landscape at the moment is that you only have a really handful of really, really big publishers. I think even 5 years ago, it used to be really, really different. When I started here 8 years ago, was there had tons of different publishers, tons of different news organisations that we could go after, and you could really feel that point of difference between different titles. Whereas now, the smaller publishers are getting absorbed by the big ones. I think Reach at the moment probably owns about
humongous.
3/4 of the media landscape. You really have four major players. You've got DC Thomson in Scotland. You've got Reach PLC, which is the big one across the UK. You've got Newsquest that we've talked about. We've got National World, who's getting bigger and bigger. Astangwin, who's bought a lot of the old, smaller local papers. And that really shows there's not a lot of room for truly independent media to thrive.
I don't think there's many left at all.
Not at all. And I think if you take the real independent media, like the Birmingham Dispatch, to take a really local example, they're not the kind of outlets that are going to take PR stories because they really want to stand out from what those major publishers are doing, which is a mix of stories from PRs like us, which are still relevant, and big syndicated stories.
Yeah, they're almost not even trying to compete with the likes of Reach PLC because they have to be different. So if you look at Reach PLC, it is very much, they have big national stories. They're syndicated across all of their regional outlets and actually behave so much more like a national than the likes of the Newsquest titles in the National World. Yeah. National World is different again, where you've got a submission model. So you're going to be submitting stories that are then approved by the editorial team. And that's how I think they're trying to probably shave off valuable hours for the journalists, because obviously there just aren't that many journalists anymore. There's no budget for them. So they all work quite differently. And then it's about how we look at the brands we work with and how we target them differently with different types of content.
Yeah, they're stretched so thin on the ground. I think there's been something like 300 outlets closing in the last 5 years, and thousands of journalists being made redundant. Even Reach recently announced that they're going to completely restructure their operation and really focus on telling video first stories. So it's not just the number of journalists that we've got access to from a regional level, it's also the way they operate. Like, we're seeing a real shift from the major publisher towards video first content, whereas the smaller one tend to continue doing what we've seen more traditionally since the start of regional media, really.
Well, I was going to ask what the biggest changes we're seeing in regional newsrooms, but I think you've covered all that. What do you think is driving those changes that you're seeing?
Just the way we consume media, I think.
Yeah.
You know, we talked a lot 5-6 years ago about social first PR.
Yeah.
And I think that's still very much true. It just looks a little different at the moment. The aim's no longer to create content optimized for shares on Facebook. It's to create content that's optimized for shares on Instagram and on TikTok and on all those video first platforms like the BBC and Reach. And I think because they're so big, they're probably a really nice way of getting a feel for where the industry as a whole is heading. And they're investing so much in their social channels, in videos, in video journalism team. And that's where this is heading at the moment. More video content, more engaging stuff, more short form, and less text only content. I think that's exactly how Reach PLC put it, actually. They wanted to move away from text only.
I guess one of the issues that regional and local titles have is competition, even from the likes of WhatsApp groups. Something happens in your street, your village, your town. The neighbours are all sharing it on WhatsApp, aren't they, before you know what's going on? And the same with the Facebook groups, for example.
I think that's where we can tap into this really lovely hyperlocal media, which, again, our teams are so good at knowing. Their geographical knowledge is incredible. And it's not, when we're putting together a media list, if there is ever a patch that we don't already work on, we're looking at, the big titles like the Reach PLC guys, but then we're also looking at what hyperlocal media is available to us. So it might not be a WhatsApp group, but it might be what's on Bromsgrove, or it might be the local moms group, and we're going to
Solihull Updates where I live.
Solihull Updates is a great
and that gets
example.
such high engagement, even with the days when it's Facebook seeing the engagement numbers it used to. People still have a missing dog on Solihull Updates.
And I think that's where people are probably getting their first line of news from. Certainly the local community news. It's going to be from the likes of Solihull Updates, not necessarily going... I mean, no one's going to be going directly to the publishers anymore. No one's logging onto, Birmingham Live to see what's going on. I think that's where social first probably still has its place. In that I think, not many people are going to pick up a print paper anymore. For the most part, you're going to be getting the news through whatever social feeds you follow. So whether it's probably more like Instagram and TikTok, but then my mum's generation is probably still Facebook.
And can brands still do that? Because obviously it's a great way for brands to talk to those communities, but you've got moderators that will or won't, I'm assuming, let brands talk to their members. I think it very much
depends. It very much depends on what kind of group it is. So Facebook groups can be trickier, but I think if you've got something that's really relevant for their community and they are open to posting things from other people, then I think that's fine. You can share things with them and they might approve it.
And presumably you'd always be very transparent when
you're doing that. We'd
Yeah.
always say it's on behalf of whichever brand we're working with. But I think if it's something that's relevant for their community and something they're going to like, if it's an event that we think, their community's going to love, then they probably are going to want to share it because it's giving value.
Yeah, it's about relevancy and value, isn't it? You would never share a stat story with a tiny hyperlocal because we don't know them. They probably wouldn't want it anyway.
We don't want to ruin those relationships.
Yeah, but ultimately they're trying to sell paper, or they're trying to get views, they're trying to get engagement. And if we give them something that's going to deliver on that because it's got the hyperlocal element, then it's mutually beneficial.
So how has the role of a regional journalist changed in the midst of all that? What differences have you seen in?
I wouldn't want to be them, I think, sometimes.
It's such a hard job.
I remember doing work experience in my local paper, obviously many years ago, and I think when I was at university. It was a big buzzing newsroom then. Like it really was the buzz, the heart of the community, and journalists could go out then to try local restaurants, to go to premiere film screenings. It was amazing, and
I feel like it would have been a really fun job then. Whereas now I feel like it's just very much, it's about clicks, isn't it? If they're not getting the clicks on the stories they're sharing, and that doesn't really matter. They've got a certain amount of stories to fill each week and a certain amount of hours to get them covered in. And there's probably one of them now, realistically, in a newsroom.
Probably, yeah.
You think newsroom is just down to one or two?
Yeah, one or two at the most.
We're seeing that a lot, and there's not really those buzzing newsrooms anymore. They're all
No.
working from home. There's not really big news desk that you can just call and then you can just ask to speak to whoever is there, because there's usually nobody there. So that's the thing. One of our colleagues was a regional journalist before she joined us, and she was just saying just how stretched and how much of an articles factory she felt like she was, because there was less and less of them and more to cover, especially as a bigger paper absorbs a smaller one. All of a sudden, you've got two people to cover an entire county, and there's only so much you can
job.
cover.
But then I think this is where we can be really helpful,
Yeah.
and our teams are brilliant at this, is that if you're packaging things up for the media and for these poor journalists that are so stretched, actually we can package it up in exactly the way they want it written. We can give them photography in the way we know that's going to work for them, and we can send it in an email that's super concise and gets to the point and tells them this is why it's a good story for you guys. And that means that they are going to have everything packaged up and ready to go. They haven't got to do too much editing, hopefully, and it will make their lives easier. So they're more likely to use our stories, and they also know that we're trusted to send them content that's going to be good.
There's just no time for them. If they have to ask for anything extra, if there's no picture attached, if there's not enough quotes, they don't have time to ask for them.
No.
They'll just
move on to the
bin
next
story,
one.
move on to the next. Yeah.
So is there still potential for PRs to build relationships with these local and regional journalists?
I think yes, but it just looks different. It's not going to be a chat on the phone every week anymore. It's not going to be going for lunch and drinks. It's probably more they know that we're trusted to send them great content, great stories, things that are relevant, and it's packaged up in the perfect way for them, and that builds that level of trust. And then actually if they did need something regionally or they wanted to know what was going on, they know that they can come to us.
Yeah.
But it's probably the relationships are just different to the way they probably looked 10 years ago.
So I think that's really important. If any brand is seeking to build connections with the communities that it serves, they need to find an agency that has already got those trusted relationships with journalists.
Absolutely.
Because the chances of making new ones when journalists are so stretched these days is more challenging than ever.
They're going to recognise our names in their inbox, and they're going to know the kinds of stories we're going to send them, and that it's going to be trusted. I mean, AI adds a whole nother level of kind of mistrust into this, because journalists are now going to have to be questioning what content's coming through. Is it AI created? Is it from a real expert? Is it from a made-up expert? And actually, I think that's where the relationships probably become more important, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah, there'll certainly be some horror stories about fake experts being quoted, not just like in regional and local papers, but nationals too. It's I think it's something we're all awake to now. So is the picture the same across the UK? Are there some areas where it's easier to get local regional coverage? Are there some areas you just think,
there's definitely patches.
Not there.
There are patches that come through where you think, that's going to be a tricky one to get coverage.
Yeah, it really depends how many media titles you've got still thriving in a one given area. You get areas where it's just one massive Reach PLC title just covering the entire county, in which case it's unlikely they'll have time for local events and smaller things like that. They prefer the big story, the video-led stuff. So.
But again, that's why we'd probably just tailor what we were doing. So if we're trying to get coverage in one location that's, dominated by Reach PLC, then we're going to be tailoring the content in a different way to if we've got, 3 lovely local titles, which probably isn't any patch anymore, there's 3, maybe 2.
A couple, yeah.
And then that's where you really delve into the hyper-local media, and you just look at different options and different mixes depending on what stories you're going out with.
So should we be thinking differently about how we define what regional/local coverage is? It used to be a standard news article, but can it take different forms now?
Absolutely. And I think we also need to stop thinking about regional as kind of a backup to national, where national is just a big crown jewel, and then, maybe we'll do a little bit of regional if we have time. They genuinely need and deserve an entire tailored strategy to them, because there's so much value to it. So it's not just about sending a press release and a picture and maybe a link to an event now. I think like Rachel said, there's so many publications are very much asset first. So it's about thinking, right, we absolutely want to be in the Reach PLC titles because we need all the SEO benefits that they give us. We need all the massive audiences and all the link building. Well, then in that case, we need to rethink how we package the story we've got and how we target them in a way that's completely relevant. That's really going to increase our chance of getting success.
Yeah.
So what does a good story look like to a regional journalist now? When do you think that one's going to land? That has got all the hallmarks of a great...
I mean, whether we're
Local
targeting Reach PLC or not, something quirky, something you've never seen before. I don't think there's ever been anything we haven't seen before, but something really different. And you see the stories land in your inbox and you're like, oh, that's going to be just a brilliant one. Like a journalist who's going to jump all over that. I think some great examples we've had lately is the care home provider we work with had a resident who wanted to be arrested.
Yeah.
And it was a wish. And it was, brilliant.
Yep. She was put in handcuffs. The police took a few photos with her. She was arrested for speeding in her wheelchair. And I think that's just the kind of stories that
That's got everything that a local journalist wants, hasn't it?
It is so fun, and regional campaigns don't have to not be fun. I think we always think of like fun, fluffy, stunty activations for national, but
or charity. I think people think big check charity.
Big check.
Yeah,
local
And
press
while that
release
works,
done.
I think some of the tried and tested things like PR 101, they still work. Local mayor, giant check for charity, fine. It's good ways of engaging with the community. It works. But actually, things that are quirky, where you've got a brilliant photo maybe or video content, something you're not expecting to be happening in your local community, that's where you're going to really get the journalist's interest.
I love that. What's both of your favourite local regional stories that you've ever worked on, and why?
I don't know if that was my favourite story, but it was certainly my favourite headline. It was some kind of open day years ago where there was a donkey and an Elvis impersonator, which is the recipe for a great party, if you ask me. And
they're two different things. The donkey wasn't the Elvis impersonator.
It wasn't, but I feel like...
But they were there on the same day.
It would have been extra fun.
Just wanted to be absolutely clear on that one.
And I think the headline that we landed on was "Don't step on my blue Swede's hooves," which I think has got to be my favourite.
That is good. That is really,
a strong contender for
and
me.
really niche. But yeah, it does contain everything for a brilliant regional story.
That's got everything. Animals. It always used to be, but back in the day when I worked on it, was animals, kids, older people.
Yeah,
that was just the stories that worked.
It still works.
And have you got a favourite?
Yeah, I think it's animals again. And we transformed one of the care homes. I think it was a Windsor one because it was... was it the Queen's Jubilee?
It was a Jubilee, yeah.
So we transformed the care home, which was so exciting. And then we surprised all the residents. They came down, it looked like Buckingham Palace. We'd even got a new fireplace and everything, red carpet. And they were having an afternoon tea and basically feeling what it was like to be royalty. But the bit that I loved was we had a furfluencer who was obviously a corgi. I can't remember what his name was. He was a French corgi. He was a French Le Corgi. I think it was Le Corgi. But he was brilliant. So we did some fantastic video content with the residents who adored Le Corgi. And they all sat around and had afternoon tea. And yeah, that was just a really fun story for the care home in Windsor.
I like that. That's a theme that's coming out a lot as you're talking through this. It's fun.
Yeah.
It is. I think you go to the national press, well, at the moment, you avoid the national press because it's full of such depressing news, isn't it? You're just like, I need a break. I need a week off. But you probably do look to and always have done, look to your regional and local news. Yes, for information on what's going on in your area. If there has been a terrible incident, anything that you need to be aware of, but you do also look for those heartwarming community connection stories, don't you?
Yeah. And I think that's what's really important, especially in the doom and gloom at the moment. You want those heartwarming stories. You want to see that lovely, nice things are happening in your community and make you feel part of something bigger. And I think that's where we can work with the brands that have these wonderful local connections and ensure that they feel like they're part of their communities.
Yeah, it's giving those titles a bit of a point of difference. There's so much of a focus on crime and on negative news in the nationals and some of the bigger regionals even, that if you give them something fun, something quirky, something that's nice to write about and something that's ultimately nicely packaged by the team, like you said, PR 101, still very much work. You still want your release to be really well written, really easy to read. You still want to make sure you share the right images. They're all high res. They're all lovely and staged.
Yeah, all the key facts
all
up
the
front.
Yeah.
A lovely punny title. We love a lovely punny title.
A lovely pun.
Yeah.
And are consumers still engaged with local media? Or are they finding local news elsewhere?
So
or are they switching off from their communities?
No, I think they're very much engaged with their communities, but the way they're getting their media is shifted. So no one's, they're not going on to Birmingham Live. You know, they're getting their news through their social channels, be that Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. And so we need to design our stories so that they are going to be social first for the journalists. And that's how we're going to reach our target audiences. It's just a slightly different way around now.
Yeah, I think for anyone that says, oh, you know, local regional media, dying, dead, whatever, just go and look at the number of comments or engagements on many of these stories.
Yeah.
And you'll see that's far from the case.
Yeah, absolutely. People want to see what's going on in their local communities. And it is so depressing in the national news at the moment. I think you want to know that lovely, nice things are still happening.
So consumers are still engaged with local and regional media. I think we can all agree on that.
Yes.
Do you think that differs by age, by demographic, or?
I think it differs by age. If you look at the medium, well, we still get feedback from some of the locals we work with, for example, that they actually get a lot of inquiries from people over 60 because they've read something in their print newspaper.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a little bit more trusted somehow.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think it's certainly with the older demographics. And then when you're looking at the more sort of millennial audience, they're probably getting their news stories via Instagram and Facebook, but there's still the news stories that are coming from the regional press.
Yeah. And for the future generations, what do we think that might hold?
It's hard, isn't it? I don't envy the future generations sometimes because I feel like it's going to be so hard to tell what's real and what isn't.
Yeah.
And there's already been lots of stories being told in recent years about that kind of trust crisis where people trust the media less and less. And I think with all that AI generated content that we see online and that journalists are trying their hardest to combat, there's going to be more and more people that perhaps a bit less trusting of what content they're reading. So it's going to be super important for any news outlet out there and any brand to really establish themselves as this kind of confident, reliable source of information.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard as well to know what the younger audience will engage with at a regional and local level, because I don't think you don't necessarily feel connected to your community until you're truly a part of it.
Yeah.
Till you have a vested interest in it, till you have a home, whether it's a home you own or a home you're renting.
Yeah.
And you're living independently, only then do you think, well, actually, I do need to know what's going on down the street. I do need to know what's happening on my local high street. And I am really interested to hear what clubs or associations, whatever, I can be a part of. And that changes as you grow older anyway.
And certainly once you have kids, you start thinking, right, what clubs are going on around the corner? What the school's like, actually? And you start to care more about those, I guess, different pockets of things that are happening in your community.
This might be where hyperlocals make a bit of a comeback, really, because you'll probably look at those smaller community pages because you just need to know what's happening right by your doorstep, not necessarily the broader regional news.
Yeah.
So we have talked a bit about trust. Do you think trust in local and regional media is higher than trust in national media?
I think it might be.
I think it might be, yeah. You probably assume that your local paper is a bit more trustworthy than your national one, just based on the fact that it's stories that you can probably go out and verify yourself. You know, your local paper's it's got no interest in lying about an event happening at your local housing development, for example. And you can very easily check that it's true or not. Whereas I think this more immaterial element to national news where you think that could be true, that could not be. I'm not really able to check.
Yeah. And it's your community, isn't it? So you're hoping that it's someone within your community that's writing these stories.
What do you think regional media offers brands that national outlets don't?
A direct line, I think, to a very, very niche audience that you can't really get anywhere else. I think there's so many things going on nationally that you might be able to get that little bit of brand awareness.
Yeah.
But you're really able to buy loyalty and trust from an audience, but through regional media.
Yeah, that's so true. If you're talking about things that are happening in someone's local community, I just think you're going to get a completely different audience engaging with that. It's going to be a much smaller audience, but they're going to be so much more engaged.
I think as well, by participating, by sharing your stories with your local market, you're going to come across as caring about your local market and showing that you're there for the long run. You want to invest in that community, support that community.
Yeah.
And there's a much higher chance that community will support you
absolutely
in return as well.
It's about becoming these community hubs. We have so many brands with nationwide presence come to us and say, we want to become community hubs. And you can't do that by just mass marketing a stunt or a campaign through a national, because that's just not going to reach the right people. That's just not going to resonate like a regional story would.
And often what we'll do is if we've got bigger campaigns, then we will have something happening at a national level because you still want that national huge awareness. But then the campaign will be filtered down to the regionals where it's just a different strategy. So you'll have a big, exciting stunt, but then you'll have something that's really important to the local community, be it an expert-led event or a project with a local school. And they just take different forms. So you might want to do both, because both have value, but for different things.
Yeah. So what would your advice be to brand teams, to marketing teams who want to engage with their local community through PR, through earned media?
I think it's about taking stock of what it is that you can offer to your local community and really working with specialist teams to understand how you can package that in a way that's going to build loyalty.
Yeah, it can't be a token
audience.
effort. I think it has to be a bit more than that. If you really do want to be a community hub within wherever you've got your care home, development, pub, then you need to be giving something that's of value. It can't just be a stunt that might get some national media coverage.
It's about authenticity. I feel like that word gets thrown around a lot in VR, but it's about being authentically local and having genuine things to offer to your community and having this genuine drive to become a community hub.
And actually caring about your community.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of the core advice I'd give to those marketing teams is appoint an agency that already really knows all those journalists out there, such as us, but I'm ever so slightly biased. And I think I would add to that, which you've said and stressed already, about tailoring the approach. I think the mistake I've seen, not for a good many years, but marketing teams sort of wanting to do one story that they can just sort of change the town name and just send it out. And I'm like, you've made this point really clear throughout the podcast that every regional title is different to every other regional title.
You can't just send something out syndicated. You can't just be like, right, this is one story and just blast just an email out that's just going to go to like hundreds of different people and hope that it lands. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, well, it's like, when you build a national strategy, you'll usually have a very different approach if you're going after the Daily Express or if you're going after the Guardian.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be any different with regionals.
No.
If you're thinking of going after Leeds Live, that's great. Devise a strategy for that. But if you want to go after your tiny hyperlocals, then tailor that approach to them and don't treat regionals as a uniform groups.
I think where we can probably really support, and we do really support the brands we work with, is that we have all of this knowledge. It's just in our heads because we've been doing it for such a long time. Whereas if you're an in-house team, you can't possibly be expected to know what hyperlocals in Bournemouth and whether Birmingham Live will cover that story and whether, I don't know, somewhere in Scotland.
Aberdeen Express.
Aberdeen Express. But yeah, you can't expect in-house teams to have that knowledge. That's where we are the experts because we've been doing it. I mean, I've been at WPR for 11 years nearly now, and this has been my role, really. You know, I've come up through the ranks, but I've always had an interest in the local media, and regional has always been something I've supported some of our biggest consumer clients with. So we have that knowledge at our fingertips, and our team is great at knowing the really specific areas of the UK and knowing exactly how we get into those titles. And you just can't expect an in-house team to have that knowledge. It would be too hard.
Yeah, it took us years to build all that knowledge of all these regional medias. We added more and more regional clients. We just built such a massive database now of regional publication, regional hyperlocals, down to Kevin at Corndon Village was that tiny webpage that they run up in Leicestershire for that one real
we know
real
them all
village.
And they know us, importantly.
And they know us, yeah.
I think something I find really encouraging is that you might think that there would have been a decrease in the number of brands that are coming to us for this sort of national, regional, local PR support. But if anything, I think it's flipped. I think more are coming to us. I think as more brands recognise the importance of connecting with those local communities, the more opportunities it's presenting for us.
I think they can really see the value. I mean, they literally can see the value when you see the kind of, if a care home gets fantastic regional coverage day in, day out, and they will see an uplift in inquiries. It's just, you can see the correlation right there. So it's not hard to show the value once you start doing this sort of nationwide PR that really taps into the regional media.
Yeah, I mean, we've hardly touched on it yet, and I don't know if I want to get us started down that road yet, but from an SEO perspective, from a geo perspective, you have hundreds of regional publications, way more than you have nationals. And I think we're starting to see the value that having large volumes of coverage can have when it comes to appearing in the AI summaries, when it comes to ranking higher on Google.
Yeah.
And that's something you can't replicate without regional media and without having a really solid, well-crafted strategy that allows you to target lots of different publications everywhere with really, really relevant stories that have the right keywords and that just deliver.
If you want to be in the AI summaries, you've got to have that volume of coverage, and I think that's what we're seeing more and more. It's a focus, isn't it? You can't ignore it.
No, absolutely not. I think my final question then, fact or fiction, getting regional coverage is easier than getting national coverage for brands?
Oh my God, so we always joke that getting into Birmingham Live is harder than the Daily Mail.
I think it is. I don't disagree with you.
Just send the Manchester Evening News.
Oh yeah, and the Manchester Evening News. They're tricky, aren't they?
Yeah,
I mean, we know what works for them, but you're certainly not going to get. You're not just going to ping them a press release and just hope for the best and get coverage. Whereas I feel like with the Daily Mail, if you've got a really strong national story, you're gonna be hopeful. Yeah. But the likes of MEN, you've got to be tailoring exactly what you're doing just for them and them alone.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't. Maybe it's unfair to say which is easier, which is harder, but probably none of them are easy. None of it's easy.
No, they're all really hard.
Well, our job is hard. But we do it well. We soldier on. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been great to chat all things regional media with you.
Thanks, Jane. That was fun.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed that.